guys, happy early Halloween and happy anniversary to the Nightmare Before Christmas. Yes, that's right. Nightmare Before Christmas turns 30 this year, and so did I. Ooh, big number. So in honor of that, we are kind of going back on my word from a few years ago, from the last time I did this theme, and we are tackling it once again. But this time, we're going to make it better. We're going to make it hotter. Whatever that meme is, I don't know. But I am very proud of this setup. I can't wait to show it to you guys. I feel like I'm really low on this camera. I am extremely proud of this one. I really hope you guys like it. I worked all month on this, and I think it was a good bang out to celebrate 30th birthdays and anniversaries all around. So without further ado, let's begin. All right, so jumping right in, to start off these kind of intense cover pages, I really have to hype myself up before I start, because sometimes staring at that blank paper, knowing what the end result's supposed to look like, is very, very intimidating. And I definitely felt that when I was doing this particular photo. Now, as some older viewers will know, the last big Nightmare Before Christmas setup I did was a couple of Decembers ago. Actually, it was more than a couple now. It was during COVID. It was the first Christmas of COVID, and my whole family got sick, and it ended up being a blessing in disguise for me, because I was able to do the Christmas version from this same artist. And when I saw the Halloween version of it, I knew I eventually wanted to do it, but because I had done so many Nightmare Before Christmas setups already, I was like, you know what? I'll just do it as a on its own thing. It doesn't need to be in a setup. It can be whenever I get to it. But then when I got back from Japan this year, I started thinking about more of the impending doom of my birthday, and also thinking, wow, the Nightmare Before Christmas is 30 years old too. Maybe this would be a good time to bring that old photo out now that I can actually film and stuff. This one, I actually didn't feel like it was nearly as daunting as the Christmas version. The Christmas version had a lot more wispy details, and this one definitely did take me a while, don't get me wrong, but it took half the time, despite still struggling with proportions and the part of the face and everything. That one's always the first hard part. I remember really struggling with the Christmas one there too. But then it was just the time-consuming part when I was doing his beard and whatnot. But we're not here to talk about the Christmas one. Why do I keep going back to the Christmas one? In my brain, I was thinking, yeah, this looks like the photo I'm looking at. This is great. But there were some tweaks on the old photo compared to the one that I wanted to do that I was like, that's not quite accurate. It didn't really work in my eyes. And this is not to discount the previous artist's work at all, but I like going for more, how do I describe this? Creepy cute, but not silly cartoony Halloween. I don't know how else to explain it. So one of the first things I changed was his bat bow. I didn't really like how the original made the bat look like he had little arms and stuff, and I'm like, that's not accurate, as you can see. I actually used the bat bow design from my little figurine that I got in Japan and used that as my reference, and that actually took me an embarrassingly long time to get the silhouette of that bat face. Usually that's the fastest thing for me to do, but I think after doing the Beetlejuice cover page, I already felt kind of burnt out from drawing. I just wasn't in that flow like I was a few years ago when all I was doing was drawing. So even though I wanted to do this, I really had to force myself to do it. But the next very time-consuming thing was his suit. The border actually was the least time-consuming thing of this whole thing, which I initially thought was going to be the opposite, considering their tiny details going around him. But no, it was really just the way his stripes were going on his shirt. Normally that's the fastest thing on the other drawings you'll see later in the setup, but this one, the design of it was very particular, so it was a lot of cross-referencing with the original photo. As I was doing this at this point and realizing, you know what, I'm liking how it looks. This is looking already really epic. It's taking up the whole page. I'm wondering where I'm gonna put October at this point, but I thought, you know what, everyone's gonna know it's for October. I already did Beetlejuice saying October. This is at the end of October. Does it really need to have the title for it? I don't think so. So it wasn't a huge deal that I didn't do that. However, by the time I finished Jack himself, I thought he is taking up a lot of the page, even though this does look like the photo. I wonder how big my Christmas one was, because in my brain I just thought it took up the whole page too. It's got to be the same size. No. No, it is not. The Christmas one actually ended up taking I wouldn't say half of that page, but his head was infinitely smaller. So I couldn't believe how much smaller and tinier it looked. It still looked great, and it definitely looks like a lot bigger on camera when I was filming it and everything. But in person, when you compare these two drawings, this one is infinitely bigger. And here you can see when I was trying to do his eyes, I'm really, really picky with his facial expression. Like, Jack has really simple eyes, even with all these extra details of wisps and whatnot. But I was just like so picky to make it look as accurate to the original photo as possible. I just didn't want him looking derpy, you know? But eventually I think I did get it, and after I inked it in, I was very happy with it. So if you're ever doing like a black and white photo and you're worried about proportions and stuff, yeah, do try to like sketch it in with the pencil as much as you can, like I am doing here. But just keep telling yourself that once it's inked in and that blending is a lot smoother than like what you can do with a pencil shading, it just adds so much extra dimension, especially when it's doing the part where the bats are coming out of his eyes and everything. That was also a little bit more of the part, because when you're looking at a colored in version, you can't quite see all the details, so I had to do a lot of zooming in on that original photo. So if you are tackling hard photos like this, don't be ashamed that you're taking a little bit longer. Like, these ones are hard. Like, if I tried to tackle this when I first started drawing, I would have been overwhelmed and I would have given up. But sometimes it's just worth going through these little tough patches just to get through it. You just gotta push right through it. Same with this nose. My God, it felt like anywhere I put it, it was not working. But again, you push through it no matter how fast frustrated you get, and you will eventually get it. So beginning on his border. Now, when I showed my parents this, specifically my mom, she actually thought that I should stop at just Jack, considering how much of a time crunch I was on. But I was like, you know what? No. If we're going to do this, and this is going to be the last setup I ever do of Jack, we are going to do it right, and we're going to do it epically. I don't know why I made a peace sign there. We're going to do it epically. The border I knew was going to take a little bit longer to do for details just because they're so tiny. And I really struggle with making things a lot smaller. Maybe eventually when I get better at like the iPad stuff, it'd be easier because I get to like zoom in and then do it like that. But when you're doing it on paper, like my hand was cramping so hard at this point, it was absolutely ridiculous. But it was the left side of the border here that actually took me infinitely less time, surprisingly. I thought it was going to be harder. It looked like the more complicated side, but no, I was just, after the house was done, I was just breezing right through it, and it felt like relief. It did still take me a full day of filming to do that full side, even though it was a lot less stressful. But when I started the right side, that's where the problems started to arise. I did also notice that the original had longer borders, so they actually were able to fit more of the things in there, so I had to be a little bit more selective of what I decided to choose to draw and what needed to be let go. Now, one of the things I did let go on the border was the design of Zero. And I picked one that historically I have not had much of an issue with, but for some reason, this particular day, I could not get his proportions right, which is why there is so much speed over footage of me just trying to draw his face or trying to draw his body, and especially his damn pumpkin nose. That should have been the easiest thing. I have drawn this version of Zero, I think 3 times at this point, and never has it ever taken me that long. But because the original on that photo, it looked too cartoony. I didn't like how his tongue was sticking out. It just didn't look right with how scary and creepy the center Jack looked. So once I eventually did get past drawing my Zero properly, I think it had fit the vibe a lot better. I also had to let go of the striped snake that like eats the presents underneath the tree. Yeah, I had to let him go on this way so I could still make room for Lock, Shock, and Barrel's tiny little masks with a dead tree. So not quite as much as I would have liked to put on, but when I looked at the final result, I was really, really happy with it. Do you ever just like look at a drawing that you've done and you're like, holy shit, I did that. I am at risk of sounding very, very narcissistic here, but I'm going to pat myself on the back for this one. I love it. I'm so happy with it. All right, so with the cover page complete, we are now moving on to the schedule page. This was the bane of my existence. This was actually the last thing I did, which is why at the end you'll actually see that this schedule page has nothing written in it, because I ended up putting this off so long because the drawing I had in mind for this one was very, very daunting. But my thought process was to walk through the movie chronologically, and so the first page, because it's schedule page, would have to be Jack as the Pumpkin King. And this time I wanted to try to do my best to put in more detail into that drawing. I used multiple different colors of pencil crayon to kind of get that woody feel, really broken and old, and added some extra thin and thicker versions of my lines to have the details of the bark. And instead of just coloring in the sign like this, I kept going more and more with the black instead of a dark brown, because then it's going to contrast more with the piece of wood that's holding the sign up. And when I was doing this to make sure I was having the shadowing as accurate as I could, I actually freeze framed that one part of the movie where he's like literally hanging on the Halloween Town sign, and try to match the shading there, which if you do try to do this, I think it did actually like work really well, doing all these extra layers of the pencil crayon, erasing in some spots, and just doing vigorously with my pen. The only downside is that, especially when you're using a lot of pencil crayons like this, like every time you close the book, it will rub off a little bit on the other side. But since I already knew that was going to be a thing from previous setups, I kind of brought that into my whole design when I drew him as the Pumpkin King. Now, this drawing I have mixed feelings about, because in my brain, I was thinking I wanted the majority of this setup to be in black and white ink, but then when I did the signage in black and browns, I was like, you know what, I like how it is colored, and I can still do this scarecrow in his original colors. I don't think it'll distract from the black and white vibe I'm going for that much, because realistically, Jack's not as the Pumpkin King for very long at all in the movie, but he is in color, and he would look kind of weird if it was just black and white. Like, it felt like it wouldn't fit, so I took that deep nosedive and decided to color him in. I knew I was going to run into some problems because the picture that I used as my example, it was actually a 3D coloring. When you're doing a photo hand-drawn version of it compared to a 3D printing, your colors are not going to match 100%. They're not going to be able to blend as well, especially when you're using ink compared to like paints, for example. I was doing my best to kind of match as much as I could. One more thing I forgot to mention, I decided that I would do the same tactic that I did with Beetlejuice's background and use my old distressed ink stamp to just kind of like rub black around the scarecrow to make it feel a bit more like, not dusty, but like a bit more of a nighttime vibe without actually painting the whole page black. That was a little hack that I learned with Beetlejuice, so if you guys are wanting to do that kind of same effect, that's the way to go. But now it's time to move on to our content list and habit tracker page. This page, I decided to take a little bit of creative liberty with it and knew the next section of the movie was Jack's lament. So even though I have drawn this version of Jack a few times before in the other setups, this one I was going to make sure I did the entire drawing. Now, the thought process was to cut bits of the next two flip pages for the actual list parts of my planning. And because I didn't have Jack Skellington lined paper that didn't look too much like Beetlejuice, I decided to do this. Beautiful transition, wasn't that? I used this Uniball white ink pen, and I sketched these lines, just like I did with this Jack costume. Yes, these are all hand-lined, on all of the papers that I wanted to use in this setup. Time-consuming as hell, but damn does that look good. And way more accurate than just using like the Beetlejuice lines that I had from scrapbook paper. So to be able to use the trackers properly after making all those lines, I cut up some old bullet journaling paper from previous books of like unused paper that I didn't need, and took it into this book, pasted it onto the lined paper, and then basically did that with the whole thing. But before I put the black sheets onto what I've already cut, I made sure that I like lined out where they were gonna go on it, because as soon as you put that black paper on, like, you can't see any of the bullet journal dots. Just keep that in mind. It did take me a little bit longer, but damn, when it was done, I love how it looked. I think I'm gonna have to take this design into future setups because I just don't need that much space for my habit trackers and content stuff anymore. Like, I'm taking a break from creating projects, so I don't need as much space to like list them out. It's really just editing videos, and when you're just listing the videos you need to do, the only real space you need to actually do full out writing plans is in the weekly spread. So yeah, we'll get to that later. But to finish up designing the habits page, I used some old Mind's Eye. That's not the name of the company. My Mind's Eye paper that had a very like Tim Burton-y vibe, and just ripped the edges together and took the Nightmare Before Christmas font. It was like a font generator online to be able to write out the word habits and content list. And just put my mini calendars there, tested where they would look best, listed out all my habits for the month, and there you go. Easy peasy. This beautiful holographic card. I actually have two of them. You'd probably noticed it on part of the bigger sheets of this spread, but in the top right corner. This I actually got at the Disney store in Japan last October. And I knew immediately when I saw them, I was like, oh, I gotta use this for my book for something. But at that point, I hadn't fully decided that I was gonna do this theme again. But comparing this Night Before Christmas theme, even at this stage, to my old setups, I was like, this is it. This is the alpha of all of the NBC setups I have done. This is a much elevated version. Even when I look back at the other drawings I've done of this specific drawing, I couldn't believe how much I sucked back then. My God, I thought they were so good back then. But now looking at this, I'm like, wow, that actually looks almost identical to the original photo. And that's why I wanted to do the mini cutout things, because I thought if I'm going to be doing these intense drawings, I want to be able to like not have to do every single one for every single page. Otherwise there would have been way more drawings and I would have not gotten this video up on time. So when I actually finished drawing all this out, I was hoping that when I like closed the mini book of content lists and whatnot, it would cover Jack properly, and it really did. There's only a little bit of his suit popping out at the bottom, but to do the shading I was a little bit more worried about because again, I'm not using paint. It doesn't blend nearly as well. So to make the gray shadowing on his face a bit more smooth, actually just did as much as I could, like brushing it softly with the pencil crayon and then erasing the edges, because sometimes pencil crayons just make those harsh lines no matter how soft you're going. But erasing it, but not fully erasing it, all going super hard, but just like soft, it helps chill it out and soften it up a lot more. How many times did I say soft in that sentence? I'm really trying to describe my techniques, but clearly I'm not the best teacher. I'm doing my best. But with this, I decided to take a different coloring tactic than I did in previous versions of this drawing. And I remembered how I filled in the black lines on my Beetlejuice cosplay and did that same tactic with his black lines. And let me tell you, it was still time consuming. Gives a great effect though. Like if you have the time and the patience, it really adds a dimension to it, but still makes it a bold black without having the pencil crayon rubbing over onto the opposite pages. I just didn't want to have that problem again. So for the rest of it, it was just easy breezy, beautiful cover girl. That was a bad joke. It was just easy. I just picked one of my lightest grays, and I did test the gray before I put it down because, Lord, you gotta test your colors before you draw with them. Take my word for it. You will thank me later. But I just colored it on the entirety of the trees and ground first, and let it dry for a little bit, because I learned that it's actually better to do darker shading using the exact same marker but overlaying it with Tombows than trying to use a different color of gray. It just blends better, but you have to be really careful with your drawing time, because the first time I tried that tactic, I didn't wait long enough for the first level to dry, and it started to go through the paper, even though this is like really thick paper that's supposed to work with watercolor. So just give it that amount of drying time to do your extra shading, and it does wonders for the end result. Now, this was the first one that I decided to do. It has still remained empty despite me really wanting to use it throughout the month, but I wanted to keep some pages blank for the flip through because I didn't want to have to worry about blurring out too much. The idea here was from one of the scrapbook pages that I bought that had Jack Skellington on it. It's a little bit more of the Beetlejuice vibe, and I could have done the tiny lines like I just did on the content list page, but to be honest, at that point, I was just like, you know what? We need something fast. So I filled them in just with following the original dotted lines of our bullet journals and sketched out Brain Dump in the Nightmare Before Christmas font again and did some distressing around the edges, put it on some black cardstock for an extra bit of a backdrop, and plopped that sucker on. And my thing died again. My goodness. As I was saying, so the Brain Dump is such a simple design that I just really wanted to focus on the border and just throw in a bunch of Halloween washi tapes that I've gotten mixed in Japan and from previous setups, and kept it very, very minimal. And I think the end result was quite good. And with that, we are now moving on to our second last spread, which was definitely the most productive and time-consuming one. Time-consuming because the cutouts that I did to make the Dutch door design that you've seen in pretty previous setups, and I'm sure on other bullet journalers, but this time I had extra sheets of the lined paper that I made from the content list page and decided to use those for my tabs and really had to take my time lining these out. So if you do decide to do this, it definitely is worth it in my opinion. It just can be a little bit more time-consuming than just doing an average weekly spread. But it saves you time in the long run for the rest of the month, especially if it's as busy of a month as it was for me, because quite frankly, there was no way I was going to have time to do a full-on drawing for each week of this month like I did the last time I did this theme, so the Dutch door was the best option. Cutting though, it's so easy to make a mistake, so you got to make sure that you sketch ideally the way that I did it, because I wrote where to cut and where not to cut, because the first time I did a Dutch door, I didn't do that, and I ended up cutting too much and didn't work as smoothly as I was hoping. But if you do it that way and take your time with it and don't be rushed, it'll have just as great of an effect, saving you time in the long run. So just to soften the edges a little bit, I added some more of my distressed ink and softened out the curves, because when I do Dutch doors, I don't really like just leaving the pages sharp corners like that, like the 90-degree corner. I really prefer making it more of a rounded edge. I just feel like when we first cut paper, it's just sharper, and I'm not very good at making things straight. So it just makes it look nicer and more professional when it's rounded off on the edge. On the top left page and left room for another Jack drawing that I did the very first time I did this setup. It was actually from this artist here. I can't remember their name off the top of my head. My wig is getting in front of my eyes again. Whew. There. Oh, that looks so much better. Not drowning. Woof. Not drowning out my face. Okay. Anyway, so yeah, for the weekly spread, because I already had planned the photo on the left, I just knew that adding very minimal washi tape to the edges would be able to make this setup look the absolute best. This is very distracting. I forgot how distracting these bangs are. And of course, on my birthday weekend, I wanted to put Jack holding a present. And also, I had to put an emphasis on the Friday the 13th. Thankfully, nothing bad happened on that day, but whew, very busy and very, very time-consuming month, that's for sure. So there's my first photo. It's a perfect fit for that side. And that's another nice thing about the Dutch door is that when you open it and close it and everything, it's like you always can look at the things you've drawn, or even if you're just putting stickers there for the whole month, instead of just only getting to enjoy them for 1 week. I used the similar old tactics since this was the first drawing I actually did of the setup, because I knew this whole setup this year was going to take the whole month really to do, because I didn't get a chance to even start it in September since I was busy with my other stuff. I wanted to do something easy first and just go with my old tactics that I knew were tried and true methods. So I was okay with a little bit of the pencil crayon going on one of the Dutch door pages. It didn't actually do it that hard, just because I didn't really sketch it in super, super deeply. but I decided to add a little bit of pop of color because there was so much black and white in Zero's collar and nose, and I just thought it looked so cute. And then on the opposite side, I used Jack as the Pumpkin King when Sally's trying to convince him to not take over Christmas. I did the same drawing, but him as Santa Claus Christmas design, and I knew I needed to draw him as the Pumpkin King's version. Tactic that the original drawing had, though, I did the sketching type of things that I did on the Jack's Lament page and Beetlejuice's stripes. Tried to do it in like the same pattern. Like I had to really zoom in on that original photo screenshot from the movie. Super time consuming, but as you can see, when it's complete, those time consuming details are so worth it. A semi-anticlimactic note, I decided to add this very last spread, the reflections page. Normally I don't really add in reflection pages unless it's like been a big month, and this is the month that I had a feeling I was going to be having a lot of big feelings for, maybe something big would be happening in general, and the first one was obviously my 30th birthday. I knew that at the end of the month, it was going to be time to go back to regular work life, even though for the past 2 months I had been on hardcore over 40 hours a week straight on content, and I really loved it, but at the same time I am not equipped to do 60-hour work weeks. I'm so tired, guys. I knew that I wanted a space to talk about what I learned from these 2 months, and I guess this is where I'm going to talk about the biggest thing that happened this month. Just before I turned 30, it was my last goal before turning 30. I finally, after 5 years of work, 5 years trying to figure out what the heck I'm doing with my life, I am finally eligible. Just trying to make this a serious moment. I'm finally eligible for monetization. Obviously, I'm not going to make that much money yet because my views are still quite low. It just made me so happy. Even just thinking about that moment makes me so happy. My face hurts now from smiling so much. I forget what Casey Neistat's quote. He worded it way better than me, but it's like something like that your 20s are figuring out what you want to do and your 30s are doing it. I mean, I've done it for 5 years, but now I get to do it where people are going to take me a little bit more seriously. I've taken myself seriously, but I'm ready to take myself seriously in the financial step. With that ramble over, let's go into the final flip through. All right, so here is the flip through of my final Nightmare Before Christmas setup. It's been a few years of doing this theme, but I feel like this is kind of like the apex? Is that the phrase? This is just the greatest version of it, and I can't imagine how else I could improve it. I feel like I've exceeded my expectations on the majority of photos, and I'm ready to close this theme back to stickers. I'm so burnt out from drawing, guys. Oh my god. If it wasn't the 30th anniversary, I probably would have put this off for a few more years. But I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I had the time to do it. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video and enjoyed another set of cosplay. And looking forward to November, because November is not just going to be the November setup. We still have to do flip throughs. The ones that I didn't get to do when I was in Japan. So there's going to be a lot of content coming to this channel for November as well. And hopefully my front door Halloween setup going to be uploaded on Halloween. The video has a lot of footage. If I don't get it up by Halloween, do you guys still want to see it past Halloween? Because it has some Nightmare Before Christmas winks in it, so I mean, technically works closer to Christmas. I don't know. Am I just reaching here? Probably. But let me know if you guys still want to see it or if it should just wait until next Halloween. But as soon as this is up, I'm going to be diving hard into that edit. So yeah, let me know what you thought of this. Let me know what your favorite drawing was. And since it worked last time, put this emoji if you made it to the end. I think that's all I have to say. I'm ready to get out of this cosplay now and have a proper shower. And yeah, with that being said, happy Halloween! Bye!